Hi, everybody.
All right.
I am still waiting for Sean McCoy and Jim Bashand. Although we do have a quorum, if we wanted to do a call to order, what do you think, Shane?
Yeah, how does that work? Would Sean just swap me out midway through? I mean, I'm fine getting started.
Karen? Should we wait or call the roll and then change out the chair if Sean shows up?
It's fine if you want to start, then yeah, if the chair shows up, then you would just swap out at that time.
I wasn't exactly prepared for this, but let's go for it. I guess I'll call the meeting to order. It's December 7th, 2021 planning board meeting to order. Donna, would you please call the roll?
Certainly. Toon Pham had to bow out. His children have a concert. He won't be able to attend. Andy Mefford. Andy Mefford's absent. Josh Schrader.
Here.
Josh Schrader is present. Dave Loomis.
Here.
Dave Loomis is present. Micah Sewell.
Here.
Micah Sewell is present. Neva Hassanen.
Here.
Neva Hassanen is present. Jim Bashand is absent. Ellie Costello.
Present.
Ellie Costello is present. Sean McCoy, not in at this time. And Shane Morrissey.
Present.
Shane Morrissey is present. Mr. Chair, there are 5 regular members and 1 alternate present. Would you like to appoint Ellie Costello as a regular voting member tonight?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me get
Can I
organized.
interject for just quickly? Hey, Donna, could you promote Oscar to be a panelist? He's on the team.
Done.
Great.
I
Thanks.
also have Melissa Gordon out as an attendee. Would you like to promote her as a panelist?
That would
Yes.
be great.
Very good.
We'll move on to approval of the minutes from last meeting. Assume that folks had a chance to take a look through those. And I would entertain a motion if everything seems to be in order.
I'd move.
Moved by Dave.
I'll second.
We got a second by Josh. And we'll just do a voice vote. All in favor of approving the minutes from last meeting, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Okay, let me pull up my agenda. Next we'll move into public comment. Donna, if you wouldn't mind putting in the call-in instructions on the screen. This is just a reminder that this is a call-in period for items that are not on our agenda tonight. So if anyone from the public out there listening or viewing us on YouTube or online wants to call in and discuss items that are not on the agenda tonight, you can do so. The call-in numbers are located on the screen here. There's numbers for cell phone users, landline users. The webinar ID and the password are indicated on the screen. And just a reminder to press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute. If and when anybody calls in, we ask that you turn off however you're listening to this in the background so that we don't get an echo, and we ask that you state your full name and before you make your comments. So with that, I'll go on mute for a minute and see if anybody calls in. Seeing any movement in our attendees list. So with that, I will close the public comment period and we will move on to staff announcements. Bailey.
Good evening, everybody. My memo was in the packet since it's the first meeting of the month. Just really a couple things. We actually have kind of a lowdown, a slower moment here in the winter. So the December 21st meeting, we did end up canceling that. So hopefully everybody got that other notice. The January 4th meeting, I'll be bringing you for once a project for a major subdivision. So that'll be coming out here soon. That's the first meeting in January. And then right now there wasn't anything on the second meeting in January. I'm hoping to, with all board appointments, we may, well, I know we'll definitely have one new member from the county side just because Jim Bashan's not reapplying for his position. So I'm hoping, I know Ellie, I think you came on after our last training as well. So I'm hoping maybe to get something scheduled either in January or early February, depending on things. If people are interested, it could just be one-on-one too with me if that's needed as well. So be on the lookout for that. Just kind of, we have a little bit of a lull with files, hopefully. So we might be able to squeeze that in. And then the only other thing I wanted to make a note on the past agenda items that I try to put on, just so you guys know what happened after planning board, where those things are going. A long range transportation plan is actually, it got scheduled after my memo went out, and it's actually going to be on this Thursday's Board of County Commissioners public meeting. So just so you guys are aware, that is going through the process. But that's all I've got for tonight, unless anybody had any questions or anything.
Any questions for Bailey? The next item was just to note that Bailey just touched base on, so no planning board meeting on December 21st. So won't see everybody until January 4th. And then a farewell to departing planning board members. I hadn't prepared anything. Is there anything that staff wants to say on that?
I don't think, I mean, other than Jim, I wasn't sure. Neva, I hadn't heard, did you end up reapplying, or were you headed out
I did
as well?
not. Thank you, Bailey. This is my last meeting at 6 years. But just be sure the city rezones, okay?
Well, hopefully we have you come back every once in a while as a public comment. Don't go away forever.
Oh, yeah, I won't. Thank you.
We really, if nothing else, as staff, I would say we really appreciate everything that you brought to discussion, as well as being prepared and everything. Karen popped on. She probably wants to say something. And I hope that goes to all board members. Staff is very appreciative of everything you guys do. So just so you know.
Yeah, I echo Bailey's comments. Everyone does such a great job and works hard at preparing. We realize these are volunteer positions, and we really appreciate the knowledge and the different perspectives that you bring. Even when sometimes you challenge us, that's all good. Those are good challenges to have. Like, we need to stretch and grow and think differently, and you help us do that. That's really important. So thank you, Neva, and thank you to everyone.
Thanks.
Dave, go ahead.
So thank you, Neva, again, the guiding light and for environment, agriculture, and Missoula is worthwhile working for, and I hope to continue that on. You set the very high pace indeed. So wish us luck, and thank you for 6 years.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Neva. Always appreciate your direct, unfiltered perspective. That's refreshing. So thank you.
I feel like this is the first time we heard about the city rezone, though, Neva. I don't think I've heard that one before. So,
Counting on you, Shane.
Okay. Any other staff announcements? That will move on to public hearings. I think we have one public hearing today, and it's going to be presented by Jordan Lyons, I believe. Finding of conformance and recommendation for adoption of the county housing action plans as an issue plan of the 2016 Missoula growth policy.
Okay.
Jordan, go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much for having us this evening. And I'll get my screen share going here. And let me see. It's suggesting every window that I have open except the right one. Okay, great. And yeah, thank you so much for having us tonight. Is everyone seeing my PowerPoint here? All right, beautiful. And I'll just remind everyone too that, you know, when we all know by now that when someone's sharing their screen, it's hard to see all your reactions and everything. So if you have a question or a comment, just feel free to chime right in. That's just fine. So yeah, I'm just here to present the public hearing tonight on Missoula County's Housing Action Plan, Breaking Ground. And I just want to say thanks so much for our CAPS leadership for being here, for Karen Hughes and Melissa Gordon for being here. And a big, huge special thanks to our wonderful consultants, Lorelei Gentinen and Oscar Saucedo Andrade from Echo Northwest, who've done just a really fantastic job on this project. And we're so glad to have them here tonight. So I'll just give a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. So we'll give a little overview of the project, and then I'll turn it over to Lorelei and Oscar to give a little background on the problem, their framework for action from the plan, and we'll kind of tag team to talk about some key housing actions. They'll kind of highlight a few of the recommendations, and I'll talk about what we're doing to implement those right now. And then we'll get down to the real, planning board business, the proposal to recommend the housing action plan as an issue plan for the Missoula County growth policy. So here is a Gantt chart that Echo Northwest made for us, and we've adapted as we've gone through the project, that showed kind of the activities of the project. And one thing that really jumps out to me on this is that you can really see that we kicked off the project, we looked at existing conditions, and then you can see we really put quite a bit of time into recruiting our steering committee and engaging stakeholders from all over Missoula County. And that really informed the report. So I'll just give a little more detail about what we've done to engage stakeholders. We do an annual community needs assessment, and this year we included several questions about housing, and we had great response to that. This year we had, I didn't get the exact number, but it was nearly 900 responses to that. So that was the best response we've ever had on our community needs assessment survey. Lorelei, Oscar, and I did a lot of one-on-one meetings with different stakeholders all over the county. We did outreach presentations to a lot of different public meetings, including community councils. We made a page on our website all about housing. We collected some preliminary feedback, which I'll tell you more about with an online questionnaire. And throughout the process, we kept people up to date with an email MailChimp listserv. And we were really fortunate to have guidance from a steering committee that represented all types of stakeholders from all over the county, folks in the nonprofit and private sector and city government. So we were really fortunate to have all their wisdom and insights. And now I'll turn it over to Lorelei for a moment to talk a little bit about what they found and kind of how they look at this problem of housing affordability in Missoula County.
Actually, I'm going to ask Oscar to grab these couple slides, and then I'll take it over from there.
Good deal.
You'll hear from me again in just a couple minutes.
Thank you, Jordan. So I'm going to be presenting a few high-level key findings that we've found when we're conducting our existing conditions analysis. And so these high-level key findings will paint a picture of Missoula County's housing problem as we see it now. And so when we dived into the data, we first looked at the housing units in the county relative to households, and we found that Missoula County has underbuilt roughly 2,400 housing units compared to national trends as of 2019. And so we believe that this number has increased recently given the COVID-19 effects. So the implications that this has is that the growing demand that exists in Missoula County, coupled with the limited new construction that has happened and the rising development costs through labor and materials, has increased a rise in housing cost throughout the county. When we look at how does median prices compare today, we've seen that housing costs has more than doubled in 2021. The recent sales transactions, we found that the median home price in Missoula County was $420,000. If we look back to 2010, the median home price back then was roughly $200,000. So median housing prices has more than doubled. Can you go to next slide, please, Jordan? Thank you. And so when we look at the greater economy of the county, we see that family incomes have not kept pace with the rise of housing cost. As this graphic depicts in yellow, median family incomes between 2010 and 2021 have only grown 15% compared to 109% with housing cost. So this has become this has put a great strain on Missoula County residents, being able to afford housing, especially renters. When we look closely at housing affordability between renters and owners, we see that Missoula County residents, specifically renters, about half of them are cost burden. So cost burden here means that residents are paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. So this is a great issue that's happening in Missoula County and has created great strains in being able to find affordable housing. I'll pass it over to Lorelei, who will be speaking on our framework for action for developing the county's actions.
Thanks, Oscar. Hi, everybody. I'm Lorelei Jensen, and I'm a partner at Echo Northwest, and it's been just a real pleasure to work with your staff on this project. Really wonderful people. And I wanted to just provide a little bit more context for how we're thinking about the action plan and the kind of interventions that it would be appropriate and fruitful for a local government such as yourselves to take. So as Oscar reported, and is I'm sure no surprise to you all, there are simply more people trying to buy units in Missoula County than there are units available. So when you have a housing market that has a shortage, what happens is that people have to compete even harder to be able to get that limited good. So those with money essentially move themselves up the income ladder that you're seeing here, cost burden themselves, spend more money, and crowd out somebody who might otherwise have been able to buy a unit that was affordable at that price point, if that makes sense. And for those folks at the lower end who may not have the resources to be able to compete, they may find themselves left out of the market entirely. So when you're undersupplied, it's incredibly important to pay attention to the folks who are at the bottom end of the income spectrum, because those are the folks who are the most impacted by the way the market is functioning, or rather failing to function for them. So that means a focus on programs and policies that get people into existing affordable units, and it means strategies that add units to the market all up and down the income spectrum, because a unit that's at the upper end makes it possible for people to price match and sort of stops that trickle up effect. But it's particularly important to focus on building units that will serve low income residents, because the market is very rarely, if ever, going to be building new units that meet the needs of people in the 0 to 30% income spectrum. So that market economics framework has very much influenced the way that we've thought about actions in the plan. Jordan, if you can move ahead. There's a range of different types of strategies that can be used to help to support housing production. ranging from simply making sure that there's good information available to those who produce housing and to those who are trying to access housing, all the way on up to becoming actively engaged in the process of building new units. The Missoula County Action Plan includes actions that are all up and down this spectrum, all the way from kind of low-hanging fruit actions that it's completely necessary to move forward with to bigger ones that really do move the needle. Next slide. So we've been thinking about this, trying to strike a balance between recognizing the urgency of taking action in the near term and the understanding that it simply takes time to add units to the market and time to really kind of get to a place where you are fully addressing housing need. And as a result, have landed on a framework for action that is organized around a 3-year action plan, with the goal of really kind of trying to work out some of the kinks in some of these actions in the near term so that you can really be moving forward with them over the long run. So we have a set of actions that we're recommending moving forward with starting right now, but some of them, as you'll see, are places where we still have some questions and that staff have a work plan that will help them work through what the immediate next term steps are. Overall, the goals are to increase overall housing production, support programs and funding to get people into housing, and then build the implementation capacity through making sure that Missoula County is partnering with others who have resources. So if we can move on to the next slide. Your packet includes the full list of actions. I'm not going to walk through all of those because that would be boring. But what I am going to do is hit on a few of those that I think it's helpful to just spotlight. And as I'm going through these, Jordan may well have some additional commentary as he's been out in the community talking to developers and to others who are trying to figure out how to solve the housing problem. And I think has some commentary that will help to make them a little bit more real. So the first spotlight is related to goal 1, add housing supply, and it is to use infrastructure investment to really support housing production. So the county already does provide infrastructure and plan for infrastructure production. What this action is suggesting is that process needs to be accelerated, in particular in Missoula urban area and in the areas around Lolo and Seeley Lake. Jordan, anything you want to add?
Yeah. And I would just add that one way we're doing that is folks from CAPS are participating in the Urban Growth Commission that kind of looks at the urban fringe and trying to make sure that's a really good body that is very strategic about how we develop on the urban fringe. And then, just looking into those, how we develop infrastructure in those other areas too.
Great. Next one to spotlight is it's very, very challenging to do any of these things without funding. So we actually have a couple of actions that are related to funding, but the one that's spotlighted here is to explore whether there's an opportunity to partner with the city on the trust fund that they've got to fund affordable housing development.
Yep. And so then we're just the step for that, we're going to get to a decision point on that. And so we'll be working closely with the Board of County Commissioners to, to look into what questions they have and help them make an informed decision about which way they want to go with that.
Okay. Home ownership. We heard pretty loud and clear from quite a number of stakeholders that helping people access this really important wealth building opportunity was really critical to the county. So the action here is to develop a program that can provide down payment assistance or other types of supports to access home ownership. And we do have some questions to sort through around specifically what shape that down payment assistance should take. But figuring that out is an important part of the plan.
Yep, and for that we've been working really hard on implementing that, and we're talking with service providers in Missoula County, and what we're hearing is that there are programs that do this, but they're having a hard time matching qualifying participants whose incomes are low enough, but they are, bankable enough. They can find a unit that will be eligible on price and everything like that. So we're kind of like looking for where's our opportunity to kind of close the gap on that and help those matches happen.
Okay, next spotlight is the county already does a fair amount to support low-income renters, primarily through funding nonprofit partners in the community that are providing those supports. The action here is to work with those partners to expand those programs to really make sure that low-income renters are connected into housing units.
And just like Lorelei said, that's something we do already in grants and community programs, and we really want to make sure that all our efforts in that are aligned with this housing action plan.
Lots of questions about short-term rentals came up when we were going through this process. And the reality is that we just collectively don't know how much they and second homes may be impacting the county's housing market. So the first step in understanding whether there's any program or intervention that's necessary there is to really understand what their role is. So there's an action around trying to understand how many second homes there are, how many of them are rented on the short-term rental market, how many individual homes are not available for rent or for sale because they're taken up as short-term capacity to really help to inform smarter decision-making.
Yep, and I think our first step on that is the city is doing their own study on that. So we'll take a look at theirs and see what we can learn from that, and then see what additional info we might need if we want to do a study of our own or do something that builds on that.
We also heard quite a lot about some of the limitations that both the city and the county experience with trying to advance housing actions because of limitations from state and federal policy and state and federal funding. So the idea behind this one is to work with other Montana cities and counties to effectively advocate for changes in housing policy that can really remove some of those barriers and make it possible for you to have a full suite of tools.
And we've already made some great connections with some folks at the city of Bozeman, and we're just starting to think we want to be really ready when the 2023 legislative session happens, and so we'll be plugging into the existing advocacy groups for that, and making sure that our lobbyists that we work with are up to speed and really taking our message to the legislature.
There are two sides to the affordability coin, both the cost of housing and the incomes of the people who might want to access those housing units. So this action item is around making sure that we are building opportunities for construction labor with that sort of goal of killing two birds with one stone. I really hate that phrase, but I need to come up with a different way to say it. Achieving two different outcomes with one action of increasing the capacity to build housing and also providing higher wage jobs.
Yep, and so on that, we're reaching out to Missoula Economic Partnership, Missoula College, labor unions, and housing nonprofits to make that happen.
And that was our last spotlight. So Jordan, if you want to take it from here.
Okay, thank you, Lorelei and Oscar. All right, so our housing action plan, this is kind of getting into more of the business of considering it as an action plan. And I'm going to really minimize so I can see my slide here. And I know that you all have had a lot of issue plans in front of you lately, so you're probably pretty up to speed on this, but just as a review, an issue plan is a detailed analysis and policy guidance on specific issues identified in the growth policy. Why adopt this plan as an issue plan? It gives specific direction on how to address the issue with a focus on implementation. Plans adopted through the public process demonstrate a level of community buy-in and priority, which is important when we are looking at resource allocation. And how do we adopt it as an issue plan? We determined that it meets the definition of an issue plan. It's created through a public process appropriate to the community, issues addressed, and the scale of the plan. And it's consistent with, and it helps us carry out our growth policy. And so here's a little more about our proposal to adopt the Housing Action Plan as a growth policy issue plan. And this is based on the staff report you received in your board packet. So we talked a little bit about the public process. We'll talk about agency and public comment on the draft plan, and the finding of conformance with the growth policy. We'll just kind of wrap things up with a conclusion, and then I'll show you the recommended motion. So we had several opportunities for the public to participate in this. We had our recent, if people saw the legal ad or the email about this actual hearing, they could participate. But we got preliminary public input also, and that was in a questionnaire in October and November that people could take through our website, and it went out through email, and that was what actually got up most of our media coverage. And we had 76 responses to that. I think the big headline from that is that we asked people some quantitative information, whether they thought each recommendation, like those recommendations Lorelei went through, and a few more, whether they thought those were very important, somewhat important, they weren't sure, or they thought they were not important. And every single one of those recommendations had well over 50% very important or somewhat important. So we felt like, in general, that was a really big vote of confidence that we were really on the right track, and had some recommendations the public thought were appropriate. And then they were able to write comments too. And so some themes we heard from that were, we heard a lot about smaller, lower cost units, kind of that missing middle. We heard a lot of comments both ways about vacation rentals. We heard a lot of comments about the need for down payment assistance. And then we had some comments that were kind of beyond the scope of what we're able to do with this plan. So we had comments about lowering taxes, which, we're obviously sensitive to property taxes, increase people's housing costs. But that's a little more of a state policy issue, and Missoula County is just one agency one jurisdiction that those taxes goes toward. There are also cities and school districts, special districts. So that's a little bit beyond the scope of what we can do with this plan. We also saw some comments discouraging in-migration, and there's not much we can do about that. If we even wanted to, and also, a few comments about rent control. And again, like Lorelei said, the state reserves a lot of rights about the rental market and housing and all kinds of powers. And so that's just not something that we can do at the county level of government in Montana right now. And I just want to mention a couple of public comments we got. We did get a couple more public comments that you received via email from me today, that were our capital P, capital C public comment that we got for this hearing. And one of those mentioned taxes, which I spoke about a little bit, also preserving existing affordable units. And we have two recommendations in the plan that are relevant to that. One about preserving existing affordable units that may be expiring, and one about preserving those what are sometimes called naturally occurring affordable units that don't have public subsidy or income restrictions, but they just happen to be a little more affordable, and preventing those from being redeveloped as something less attainable for people in the community. So like many of those are manufactured home parks. We had some comments. We had a comment advocating for more density in those smaller units, including allowing duplexes and triplexes and reducing parking minimums. And I think we have some recommendations in the plan that kind of speak to that. We talk about zoning all of Missoula County, and also having incentives to even give density bonuses and even reduce further parking requirements for developments that are income restricted affordable housing. And then we did get one comment about regulating vacation rentals. So as you saw in your packet, just a lot of comments about that. That's a real hot button for people. And then we have a recommendation in the plan related to that, to study that issue more and get a better handle on that, like Lorelei said. Okay, so, and then in the staff report, the real kind of body of the staff report is showing the conformance of the housing action plan with Missoula County's growth policy goals. And we thought it conformed with the growth policy in these particular goals. Goal number 5, promoting economic development that creates opportunities throughout Missoula County, including people living and working in rural communities and across wage levels. Goal number 9, as part of planning, support the provision of infrastructure and services to and within rural communities. Goal number 10, promote opportunities for a wide range of housing choices, especially for those who are homeless or experiencing high costs for housing relative to their incomes. Goal number 13, promoting equal access to employment, safe housing, transportation, community services, and amenities for all segments of the population. Goal number 15, providing effective customer service and flexible, predictable, and timely development review processes. It wasn't an action that we highlighted, but there is a recommended action of improving the efficiency of the development process and making it easier for housing to get online. And goal number 16, promoting cooperation between Missoula County and the city, state, federal, and tribal governments. So, and then also the housing action plan is also in conformance with the other issue plans and area plans that are already attached to the growth policy. So with our Missoula urban area land use element, it's in conformance with the key imperatives of facilitate compact development patterns, provide adequate area for housing supply, promote a wide range of housing types, use the infrastructure we already have, and plan for new infrastructure. And then it also is in conformance with aspects of the implementation of that policy. The codes update the Missoula County zoning regulations, subdivision regulations, and zoning map. Infrastructure, build and manage infrastructure to proactively guide where and how growth occurs. And coordination, work with the city of Missoula to plan for growth in areas adjacent to the city. And then, we have a lot of different area plans attached to the growth policy. And so these were some examples. The Lolo Regional Plan housing that meets the needs of residents, provides diverse housing stock, respects the capacities of existing or future public services and facilities, and recognizes land limitations. The Satupkane Master Plan, expand affordable housing options and create a consistent and predictable development process. And the Sealy Lake Regional Plan, promote housing that meets local needs, provides diverse housing stock, respects the capacities of existing and future public services. Ensure housing development and upgrades are compatible with the plan, and provide opportunities for a variety of housing types and locations. All right, so with all of that in mind, in conclusion, the Missoula County Housing Action Plan, Breaking Ground, qualifies as a growth policy issue plan because it was adopted through a robust public process It is consistent with the Missoula County growth policy goals, objectives, and strategies. It furthers goals related to housing, access to community services, infrastructure development, review services, and coordination. And it is focused on actions intended to address housing needs and challenges facing Missoula County. So, with that conclusion in mind, our staff recommendation is that the Missoula County Housing Action Plan Breaking Ground, as shown in attachment A of the staff report you received via email, is found to be in conformance with the Missoula County growth policy. Be it resolved that the Missoula County Housing Action Plan Breaking Ground, as shown in attachment A of the staff report, be recommended to the Missoula Board of County Commissioners for adoption as an issue plan of the Missoula County growth policy based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law. Okay, and with that, I would I would hand it back to the chair for if you have questions or comment.
Thanks, Jordan, and thanks everybody else for the presentation. There isn't another presentation or anything like that. Is that right, Jordan?
Right. Yep.
Okay. So with that, I think we need to move on to public comment before we get into planning board questions. Donna, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the call-in information, or if we can, there we go. So I'm going to open up the public comment period. The call-in instructions are on the screen in front of us. And so there's numbers for cell phone users, landline users, the webinar ID and the password are listed. Just a reminder that use *9 to raise your hand if you're calling in on your phone, and *6 to mute and unmute. If anybody does call in, we'll ask you to turn off any background noise in your home to prevent us from hearing an echo. And we'll ask you to state your full name for the minutes, and keep your comments to 3 minutes or under. With that, I'll go on mute for a minute and see if anybody calls in. Donna, I'm not seeing any movement in the attendees. Are you?
Nope, there is nothing.
Okay. With that, I will close the public comment period and we'll move along to planning board member questions. Anybody want to get us started? Dave, go ahead. Dave, you're muted. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I made some notes about what I think are the top policy that the county should strive for. And I was going to want to just throw that out for a couple of minutes here, but I guess I should stop and say thank to the county and the consultants. I think it did a good job, easy to read, easy to follow on a really complex issue. I appreciate that part of it for sure. So good job. So the Housing Trust Fund, it's suggested it should be with the city. I agree in terms of, so we don't get duplicate processes. I realize that the city and the county do things differently, and the county is usually more efficient, but given the, the scope of the issue, that it should be a joint project, and there's plenty of territory in the county that is going to be urbanized to some level, and so we need to get that closely coordinated. Another issue that was brought up, my number one issue personally is about mobile homes and existing lower cost housing. The county has an opportunity, city does too, and sometimes they do it and sometimes they don't do it. That is the existing housing stock of lower cost housing stock. We need to go out of the way as a county to maintain that housing stock, which includes loans and improving units, improving water systems. Money's already been spent in some of these, like Westview, plenty of money, public money in the past, bringing water, other disposal systems, and to those parks. That is, basically the best entry-level housing around. So there's a few terrible places. In general, manufactured mobile housing presents the best opportunity in the county and city for that. And so we should, down payment increase, repair assistance, all of those kinds of things that may have mentioned. That would be my number one item. Here's a tricky one to me, short-term rentals. I get where you're going on that about we just don't have enough data, although the realtors probably do, and they could tell us, maybe you've already had in-depth conversations with them. It's kind of a lot of that is just off the record, off the books thing. So I want to, if we get to it, the county get to it and setting up policies about how to deal with it. I'm wondering about maybe a de-transfer tax or a fee or something like that, basically about what I want to say, economic. when they sell a house and it goes to a higher cost, I think there ought to be a small fee charged for the differential from what the original cost and the future cost. I don't know how to figure that out, but I'm just putting this out there. And that goes to the Housing Trust Fund. Also on short-term rentals, I'm wondering if there's any interest in the whole problem about vacant houses. Two kinds of vacant houses, one that are owned by people, and maybe it's in disrepair. Is it worth putting public money into it or not, to provide safe housing? And the other, of course, are people who own them and leave them vacant on purpose. Maybe they're gone for 10 months of the year or so. And so I'm wondering what that cutoff point would be, 6 months, 8 months, that house sits vacant. Maybe we could assess a fee for, basically, you've got a perfectly good housing thing here, and it could go again to the Housing Trust Fund, to people who could use it to actually enter houses that they can't afford now. So I think a real problem in this town is vacant houses. on purpose or even by accident. So those are the things I'd like to put out there. Some of it's pretty radical, but I think it's worth having a discussion. Thank you.
Jordan or team, do you want to respond to any of that? I know that there weren't really questions in there necessarily, but is there anything that you'd like to talk to Dave about?
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I think those are great comments. And I think that some things we've learned are that other communities are doing some things along those lines. And yeah, I think, yeah, I think you're right on track with a lot of that. And in some of the language, I think we wanted to give ourselves a little flexibility. And so we have some language in there like explore this, and some of those like could definitely go that way, but we may find as we get more into the weeds on particular recommendations that we need to think about things differently. But yeah, I think your points are very well taken. And I wonder does anyone else want to jump in on any of the particular recommendations?
I would just say that there's a home in the plan for almost all of the issues. I think all of the issues that you raised, and that a big part of Jordan's time over the course of the next little while is going to be making progress in each of those areas. So the feedback you've provided is really helpful for him, I'm sure, as he moves into that work plan.
Ellie.
Hey, thanks. I have a few questions, but just to start out, what happens at the end of the 3-year action plan?
Housing is affordable and we can all move on to another. No, I think that, I think our vision is like, we just wanted to put, it is such a complex issue. Like I said in my last presentation to you all, it's a wicked problem. It's so complex. And I think we were just putting a time frame on it to, that would be a time when we would want to do some like major plan maintenance and have a new plan that's about as far of a time horizon as we wanted to consider. And hopefully some of this stuff has really been successful and we can really build on that and kind of take it to the next level for the next iteration.
Well, and part of that, my asking that is because I feel like there is a lot of more general places that this plan could go, so that maybe that's intentional, it sounds like, so that you're able to see what you discover in the first phases of the plan and then form kind of more specifics from there. But if I guess I would like to see maybe it be a little bit more aggressive if it's only for 3 years, that you can like check off specific numbers of things or anything like that. And I don't really see a ton of that in here, though there clearly is a place that those things could arrive into this plan. They're not in what we're approving today. And so I was curious about that. Like, then are you going to have to start this process over and do like the next 3-year plan? And is that going to take, 6 months to do? Like, how, like, does everything go on pause while you do that work? That process is a little confusing. You don't have to respond if you don't want. I could just jump into another question.
I can respond. I can take this one. I'm Karen Hughes with Community and Planning Services. So a growth policy amendment usually has a 5-year timeline to where you do like a review and determine whether and what updates might be needed. And so the idea was to shorten that. We want to be more accountable. We want to take a closer look sooner. This is intended to be an action plan. It's not, we're still learning. We're still kind of building the foundation for the county. This is kind of our first entree into this more specific housing work. So we tried to push ourselves, but also be realistic in terms of like, we're plowing some new territory and we're going to have to kind of figure out our path forward in our role. So it gives us both direction and kind of the open lay of the land to kind of find our way. But that 3-year idea is that we take a look and see where we're at. We don't wait too long. We take a look and see where we're at, and we make adjustments and keep moving. That's the basic idea.
And Karen, if I could just add briefly onto that, you know, we work in a lot of communities around the Pacific Northwest and Intermountain West, and especially given that this is the first plan, what we've seen is it can take a tremendous amount of time just to get a plan in place. And there can be a lot of spinning and sort of process around trying to get to the kind of specifics that you're describing. And given the urgency of the issue here, we really did want to try to get commitment to a set of actions in a time frame that you could make real progress on them without spending 3 years getting to that commitment. So as Karen said, we're really just trying to strike the balance between, you know, getting commitment and gaining some momentum, but without spinning wheels. And it will have to be revisited in another 3-year time period. And it does not need to be a full, complete review process. I mean, I'll leave it up to y'all in terms of how you would want to manage something like that. But you know, you've got that foundation there now. So really you're almost in a space where it's more like work planning and less like strategic planning.
Thanks. That it's good to think about it and have those responses. On some of the points that we've already heard from Dave, I do think that if you think about a 3-year time frame, taking the action item of a study on short-term rentals, if you're considering the growth of housing costs to continue in a similar trajectory, I don't know that it will, but a similar trajectory to what we've seen, that's quite a bit of time to go by without maybe taking any action on those. So I think that I'd love to see something about some kind of direct policy that we make coming in that time a little bit quicker on that particular issue as well, and not just have it be that we accomplish a study and 3 years later. So if we've gone up over 100% in the past decade, and we say, like, I know that's not how it necessarily works, but that, like, if we continue on that trajectory, it'd be really, it's a big problem that just continues to get worse if we're not taking action sooner. I'll give a break and let some other questions come in.
Thanks, Ellie. We'll go to Neva.
Thanks. And thanks for you all for your good presentation. It's nice to see folks from Eco Northwest here. I used to live in Eugene. I remember when it was started, which is like, I'm old. So, but anyway, great organization. Appreciate your presentation. One thing I was surprised by, and maybe it's in the materials and I missed it. Oh, actually, before I go into that, I found the public comment document very hard to read. Did anybody else? I could not even wade through that. The individual letters we got today, I read, but it's just the way it's formatted. It was very difficult. So I don't know if that's something got screwed up in translation. Anyway, my question, I have 2-part question. So the first part is how, you know, the data you presented with the ratio of number of units to the number of households, as I understood it, that's 2019 data. And a lot has changed here in the last 2 years. And I'm surprised that we didn't get any kind of sense of what new housing is in the pipeline, like how many building permits out there in relationship to what we anticipate more in migration to be, and a relationship to what we think the needs are going to be in terms of numbers of units over the, you know, a certain time frame, maybe 3 years even. So we've got like a 2-year data gap, and then this is like a 3-year plan going forward. So I feel like I would have liked to see some more up-to-date data, or at least estimates. And So here's my second part of the question is, so if we could come up with a number like that, like how many units are in the pipeline and how many are we going to need, could we then look at that in relationship to the county's zoning that's coming in for the that will be, you guys will be doing early next year, and how many units are projected to be developed in that peri-urban area, the land use element. Because I guess it seems like this could be more data driven, I guess. And so that's my question is like, what really, what do the numbers look like in terms of projections? What will this new zoning that's going to come down the pike provide theoretically?
Jordan, do you want me to take the first stab at that one, or?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. I couldn't tell if you were pausing to jump in or just being thoughtful or what. So I'll let them answer the zoning question because I'm less familiar with the specifics of that. But on the data piece, I guess I would start by saying we got 2020 data midway through this process, and most analysts are not particularly interested in using 2020 data because of the number of issues that came up with gathering that information in the middle of the pandemic. So I think there's some data quality questions there. It wouldn't be that terribly difficult to update with 2020 census data, but I'm not sure that it would tell you a story that would be more believable than the one that you got from 2019. And it would probably still tell you the same story, which is that you don't have enough housing relative to your population growth. So, and then in terms of projections, I mean, look, we're an economics consulting firm, and that's what I would love to dig into doing that kind of analysis and look more carefully at population projections and try to line that up with your current set of permit data from your pipeline. This process was very much more focused on getting to action. I think everybody knows you have a housing problem in Missoula County, and to spend the time to quantify it was less valuable to the county than spending the time figuring out what to do about it. That's not to say that better data wouldn't inform better action. And I think it would make a lot of sense to build that into the ongoing work plan that the county will be moving forward with. And some of what you're describing there of looking at the actual development pipeline is particularly important for thinking about the geographic distribution of housing and some of the other very important planning related and zoning related issues that the county is otherwise dealing with. And so I would suggest that that's a really great idea. But for the sake of getting something through in 6 months that could be adopted, that would tell the story of the need for housing reform and for focus on intervention, we struck the balance with that in this particular process.
Yeah, and it's not so much like, I mean, I don't think anybody needs convincing that there's a problem,
right.
But I think it's more like, how do we know we're succeeding, right? You get to that, in those 3 years, how many units do we need? I mean, that seems like a pretty fundamental thing to know for planning for, if a big part of the plan is actually to build units or possibly, or to buy land for units or whatever the county's, going to do action wise. So that's why it's not so much as like, I want to document the problem. I'm thinking like Ellie is like, how do we know we got there in 3 years? And what are the measures? And units are an important measure. So, and I appreciate your response. I realize the data is kind of a mess right now too, but
yeah. It's occurring to me that the other place where that would be really helpful is for ongoing coordination with the city as well, and sort of understanding where and how units should be built. So I'm nodding my head in agreement with you on that.
Yeah, and both the city and the county, as you may remember, will be going through some level of a growth policy update. And that's where we look at our projections and we align our population projections, and we do that together. So that is coming as well. All these things are kind of walking hand in hand, side by side, whatever metaphor you want to use. The question about the zoning and how many units come online, how we raise our kind of development potential, especially for the urban area. there is data coming. I don't have the numbers tonight. I know they're still kind of working on it, and they're looking at how many units could be allowed under the current zoning versus with the new zoning. So we will be bringing those numbers forward. We know that's of interest. Obviously, that was part of the reason we did that project. So that we hear you, and we want to tell that story. So that will be coming with the zoning project.
Thanks.
Micah.
Well, thank you all for the presentation. I have a question specific to the goal of coordinating with entities to make changes towards, federal, state policies. I would love to hear what policies specifically, are on the table that you're thinking about right now. Is that inclusionary zoning, trying to get that back? Is it, limiting the annual rate of rent increase, or I'm just brainstorming things that came to my mind, but I would love to hear more about what's getting traction in other communities, because I know that this is not an isolated issue in Montana. In Missoula County, there's other places going through it. So yeah, what is looking promising to you, and what are you thinking about working on that front?
The top thing that came up as we were talking with partners, and I'm sure Jordan and Karen and Melissa too can add to this, but was really about funding for affordable housing production and understanding the formulas that distribute that across the state, and even the process by which that is done can sometimes disadvantage certain geographies. So that was kind of the issue, as our stakeholder group that we had that got together to help to support this process included affordable housing developers. And that was one of the issues that they pointed to as needing, I believe the word they used was education at the state level to help to make sure that that was done more effectively. But some of these other issues that you just raised were also kind of bubbling around, and how I think, Jordan, it will be to your work plan to sort of sort through what specifically you'll want to work with other cities to advocate for.
I would throw in terms of the land use related legislation, our role is primarily to play defense with this legislature, and that will be for the foreseeable future. I think we try and protect the county's ability to do land use planning, including zoning. Already they've chiseled away by creating a quick and easy way to with a very small group of people to undo zoning. So that's huge. If we make it really easy to undo getting basic entitlements in place, that is really problematic for communities that are trying to find places for growth, and where we can make infrastructure investments to support that growth. So probably a lot of land use stuff will be in defense when it comes to the state. Missoula is always on defense when it comes to the state legislature, it seems like. But right now, that's probably the best way. That we need to try and protect those things that allow Missoula communities to grow and prosper and plan for the future. And that's common amongst all the urban areas and some of the smaller communities as well. We work together in coalitions to try and help legislators understand the Subdivision and Plating Act and the zoning statutes and planning statutes. There is a group, an interim group, working on trying to find common ground to make revisions to make planning and zoning and subdivision work better together in a way that makes sense. So we're hopeful that maybe something can come out of it, but it may be more defense than offense.
Josh.
Thanks, Sean. Yes, one of my questions was kind of focused on the development side. And I was curious if you guys, explored helping developers or builders innovate or create incentives or for them to take risk, to put innovation in place to bring down the cost of housing. I mean, it's really amazing. We build houses today much like we did 100 years ago, on-site, stick frame, not a lot really has changed in quite a long time. And it's just such a tough issue because as construction costs continue to go up faster than incomes, rents and prices can only get chased so high before projects just don't pencil and capital dries up and everybody goes home, until construction costs come back down. So I just wondered, did you look at, incentivizing the producers of housing stock to maybe take some extra risk and try to innovate to bring down the cost of construction? So that'd be my first question.
I think I'll just assume I'm the first batter on all of these, and then unless it's obvious that I'm not.
Should be directed to.
There's probably some better sports metaphor than that, but I'm not a sports person. So there are some incentive-based actions that are included in the plan. They're primarily around making sure that affordable housing is being constructed. And I guess what I would say is that when you're looking for innovation, it does tend to come out of the private sector. And I think you've got some developers in your market that are already working on that, and continuing to partner with them would make a lot of sense. The reality is that in the 3-year time period that this plan is looking at, it's not likely to move the needle substantially on housing production, just because of the time frame that it takes to actually get something through to construction. So paying attention to that and supporting it wherever you can, I think, is really an important move to make, but not one that's likely to make a big difference in a 3-year time period. We are seeing a lot of really interesting stuff going on. We've got some folks in Oregon that are working on 3D printing housing, which is pretty cool. There's a really interesting video that's worth watching on that. And we've got some folks that are thinking about building modular housing out of mass timber and, trying to tie together a rural economic development story with an affordable housing story. The reality is that the construction costs on those are not lower than the kind of traditional stick frame construction costs right now. So it's not to say that there's not value there, because there is. It's absolutely worth kind of continuing to try to innovate in that space, but it's going to be a bit before those are really brought to bear on the market in a way that can change the cost structure for developers. Land is still going to be the biggest chunk, and then your labor. So that's my cut at that one. Anything to add from the team?
Yeah, I guess a couple things that I might add is that there's more traditional things that we can do by helping invest in infrastructure, helping look at development processes and streamlining in areas where there's planning, zoning, and infrastructure in place. There are some places where we can help support the private sector in doing some of that innovation, where I think the organization that's a little bit better equipped to actually more proactively help with the innovation is through the Missoula Economic Partnership, which both the city and the county are partners of, and through their Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy that just got approved by the EDA. Those are some of the strategies that they're specifically looking at in the housing realm, is how to help the private sector with innovation and thinking differently about getting housing on the ground, but also thinking about it still gets on the ground through these processes that local government has control over. So it's kind of thinking about the whole life cycle of getting development and units on the ground, and then where are different places where different entities, city, county, private sector, economic development agencies can help maybe make improvements along the way and incentivize or provide incentives.
Yeah, there's an interesting group I just connected with recently out of Butte called Foothold. I think their web address is buildfoothold.com, and they're focused on modular housing and smarter, smaller, more sustainable units. And they're doing some interesting things kind of on the edge of development that may be worth looking into and seeing how they could be partners in some projects possibly. So then other question was, I saw smaller, lower cost units are a priority. Did you explore any different kind of unique housing typologies like co-living or micro units as options for the community, and how could zoning help make those more feasible?
I didn't look into those specifically, and it actually isn't something that came up through much of the public and stakeholder engagement that we've done, though we have seen those models being really successful. And I think it's important to make sure that there aren't barriers in place to enabling those kind of unit types to be constructed.
And I think traditionally you saw them in your more urban areas like LA and really hot areas where housing was really high cost. Well, turn around 2 years later, Missoula is one of those places. So, maybe some of those solutions now make some sense around here.
Yeah, so we do have a variety of housing types included in the zoning. I'm not sure if we got all of those that you mentioned, but it may touch on some of them, and we certainly can continue to look at that and build in more opportunities. In the county, we have a lot of limits. Like, in order to really support micro living type of situations, you have to have the infrastructure, and that's the biggest barrier in the county. So that's been kind of like we could authorize those, but until we get infrastructure in place in the appropriate areas, like, you can't get them there. So that's been also kind of trying to think about that county role is, we can authorize and make it happen, but infrastructure, planning for infrastructure and getting funding to get that in the ground is probably a first step for us.
And I would just add that based on stakeholder input, I did give input to long range planning to make a couple of changes to the zoning code update that made it easier to develop those types of projects.
And just the last question is, did you guys identify any pockets of development in the city or the county that represent the direction that we need to be moving? Kind of parables or analogs that are living, breathing examples of, hey, this was done really well. Look, they put a lot of really well-designed units in a small space, whether it's multifamily or for sale product. Did you guys see anything that really represents where we need to be moving towards?
I think the answer is we need all housing, all types, many and more units. It wasn't really a case study oriented sort of project, so it wasn't that might be a good follow-up piece to look at some of those things, and probably look even outside Missoula for good case study examples, or for us to create some pilot projects that don't look at these various strategies individually, but think about how do we maybe look at a development proposal that combines a whole variety of these things into a kind of a pilot project. So I think you're onto something. We didn't kind of organize it that way, but I think we are starting to think like, how do we take this and then think more holistically, whether it's how to support a particular kind of housing development that has all these different kinds of attributes, or support in a private effort. All of those things and more are kind of on there. You're on the right track. We're just kind of turning the corner and getting there with you.
Got it. It's just we're constrained geographically, right? And if we don't want to push out and develop all our farmland, we need to look inside. And how can we take a place where there's 5 units and put 10 on in a respectful, thoughtful, responsible way? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the other thing is thinking about we didn't think about so much the kind of case studies or good examples, but we did think a lot about where there are kind of some key opportunities, and places like the Y and Bonner Milltown and Lolo, where there's already sewer and water system. Sealy Lake, we have a planned sewer and water system, trying to see if we could bring that back to life. So trying to think about the opportunities so that maybe some of those things could happen in those places, but we have to have those places first. We need some more of those.
Thanks.
Let's go to Ellie.
Hey, so one of the things that I was really excited to see in the plan was that there is the desire for county and in partnership with the city to find some of those solutions to access for individuals to owning homes. And I think you were right on that. it's really challenging to navigate the federal programs to do that. I am an example of that. 5 years ago, I qualified, but the funding from one of those federal programs for a rural assistance program couldn't afford anything that was within what they required in the area. So I think that's really great and going to help a lot of people who wouldn't have access otherwise. So it was really exciting to see that component. One of the questions I have is, what are some of the mechanisms for maintaining current affordable housing stock? I don't have a good sense of that.
So I think there are a lot of different pieces for that. So and yeah, and so I think one thing that we're kind of learning more about, and we're just hearing that story a lot, that there's money there, but it's hard to spend the money, because it's hard to find that kind of the kind of Goldilocks person, and have the stars all aligned for them to be able to get one of the few units that is affordable enough to qualify for that. And I think we're kind of looking at some things of and this is like a little bit to what Josh was saying. It's not as much like the physical development of properties, but like programs that work in other communities. And in other communities, there are programs where a homeowner can get a little bit of money to put a deed restriction on their property, so it becomes an income restricted property, or put the property in a land trust. And so I think we're kind of investigating options like that, as maybe that's kind of the thing that can like kind of close the loop on like getting the income qualified person into a qualifying unit. And then for preserving properties, like you probably all followed like the Bridge apartments recently. So I think that's kind of something we need to start now for like the next generation of properties. There was an article in the paper today that these subsidized units, those are not affordable in perpetuity. Those do sunset. So we need, and there's a pretty detailed recommendation that we need to look at when we subsidize or help one of those projects get developed. We need to make sure that when the subsidy is up, we don't have another situation like the Bridge apartments where it just goes out on the open market. So we need to either make sure that projects like that give an entity like a housing authority or HRC or Homeward the right of first refusal, give them like the first bite at the apple when the compliance period is over, and that might go on the market. And then the other thing is, including a deed restriction that could potentially go a lot longer than 20 or 30 years, like for one of these properties. That seems like a long time, but then the next thing those sunset. And then we need to use tools that we can, like we kind of talked about earlier. Some of those properties are maybe don't have subsidy, but are just places that happen to be more affordable, and we need to use other tools for those, like supporting resident-owned communities, for instance, to help keep those affordable properties, and make sure that the folks who live there aren't losing their housing when the highest bidder comes along for the owner of the park. Did others want to add to that too?
I thought that was very comprehensive, Jordan.
I have another question that I guess I have a lot on this topic. Jordan, you might be able to speak to this because of some of your past work, but who is utilizing renter services? How frequented are those? What will it do to increase renter services? Can you just talk about that line item in there?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I just think that, so we do have programs. We have like, the county actually has funds, the Community Assistance Fund that support some programs that relate to renting. And the county also administers the interim assistance program through HRC that helps people afford housing before they receive their Social Security disability. So we have a lot of programs, and then the county helps administer some home funds and CDBG. So we have a lot of different types of programs, and I think that we just need to make sure that those are all, and yeah, like you alluded to, Ellie, I've done a lot of different things in the housing world, and I've seen some like well-meaning programs become sort of, they can skew too far towards the resident or towards the landlord. And I think we want something really aligned that has like a really coherent set of values, and especially is like acknowledges that there is like a root cause of all these, of like the kind of many-headed hydra of housing problems, like that really all stems from this housing shortage. And so I think that that's where I would really like to align all those programs, is like really making sure we're doing things that are not, at least not exacerbating that housing shortage in the process of assisting individual renters.
So sorry for laughing. It had nothing to do with what you were doing. I realized I was unmuted, and so that dog was very cute.
Just a couple of other questions. Thank you for humoring me and going down this path with me. Are there still opportunities for public comment, or is that period closed? I mean, like for this plan, like it's past the public comment stage? I just had a couple people ask. So
no, it's not. The public comment is open through the commissioner's hearing, which is currently scheduled for January 13th. Is that right, Jordan? Yeah, so there'll be opportunities for public comment once you pass along your recommendation, that it's still, the advertisement's still out there, it's still open for public comment.
Thanks, that's helpful. And then I touched base with a friend who lives up in Sealy Lake, and I know you guys did work to like pull in stakeholders from that area. And she reviewed, I just wanted some input because I am not there, I'm in Missoula City, about how she felt and get to use that. So it's a one person comment, but that it does feel fairly Missoula centric, even though I know that you're making an effort to include, Lolo and Sealy and other places in Missoula County as well. And so just keeping that in mind as you're continuing to work on those action points, that the Sealy people care about this too. So thank you for working hard on it and for answering all my questions so far.
We'll go to Neva.
Thanks. Ellie, just to follow up on Sealy, I really think the best thing we can do is encourage Sealy to get sewer, because I hear you that it needs attention. I mean, I have a cabin up north of there and I go through there all the time, and yet it would be irresponsible in a way for us to say, yeah, let's put more housing in Sealy until they get sewer. Now, of course, I know it's a controversial topic, but I have a really quick question or just comment really is, I noticed that the Lolo plan was from 2002. So that's 20 years old. And, would be really cool if we, I'm guessing that that's on the docket to be done at some point soon. And it would be cool if we could think about the plan, that area in relationship to Missoula. And Josh has brought this to our attention numerous times about the safety of the highway. And, I kind of wish they were, instead of doing a rapid transit just like a few miles here on Brooks, that we were doing something that was rapid transit between Missoula and Lolo, and try to get some, cars off the road. Anyway, that's just more of a comment about that. I'm hoping that, Lola will get attention because like you said, Karen, that they have sewer. So that makes it smart as a place to grow. The other last comment I want to make is that, I guess I'm struck with these housing plans that, we talk about the problem is the market and the way the market, is being driven into these, unreasonable directions. And yet our solutions are pretty much about the government trying to either build housing or incentivize housing or, as opposed to, there aren't really structural fixes, and I don't know what those would be exactly. Inclusionary zoning, it might be an example, but I know it's not the be all and end all. I have friends in Oregon say, yeah, it's got its ups and downs. And other places might experience that as well. So that's just a comment. Like, I wish we could think of some things that would actually address the underlying causes of this, which are things like, massive investment from out-of-state realtors, selling Montana, and so on. And I don't know how to do that, but I appreciate that you guys have come with this plan. And whenever we want, I'm happy to make a motion for it. Shane, you didn't really get a chance in here, so when you're ready, I'm happy to make the motion.
Maybe I could just ask a couple of quick questions if before we move into that portion. Have you guys done any studies of, or is there anything in here to study, construction workforces at all? Just anecdotally, my experiences is that Missoula is lacking in tradespeople, and which it will slow construction, and it could be one of the reasons why not as much is being built as we would like. It's one of many reasons, but is there anything about studying the labor force in Missoula and trying to figure out how to correct some of those potential issues?
Jordan, I saw you on mute, so.
Yeah. So we do have that recommendation. I think it's recommendation 3.4 is about that partnering with agencies that can help us improve that situation. And so that's definitely something that we want to learn more about and try to improve that situation.
Okay. I guess another thing that I was wondering is, I think that it's good that we are going to study, short-term rentals. That sounds great. I would encourage, everything that I've heard tonight is that, partnering with other folks so that you're not doing duplicative work that all sounds great to me. Keep it lean and mean so that you can be action oriented. Like, I think that's really great. I was wondering if there's been any study of, the effect of university student housing in town as it relates to, it's tangential to short-term rentals, but I can't help but notice that there's a lot of empty dorm rooms at the university, and there's a lot of students seemingly living in the community for 10 months a year. Is there any point in studying, how that could have an effect on the housing shortage?
I'm kind of looking at Jordan because I'm not sure if that's something that folks in the city of Missoula have tried to tackle. It was not something we looked at because we were focused on the county. But that doesn't mean that it's not important, and maybe other people have already tackled it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, well, I mean, I think when we're looking at the trends, I mean, I would just say that, it's hard to like, it's hard to pin, when we see that trend of home prices going up and housing costs going up, it's hard to attribute like certain portions of that to different, trends going on. But I mean, I think one thing to be aware of is like in that time frame that we looked at, like has really shrunk. So like this, like the city and county have grown, but like the student population of has shrunk a lot, like more than any other flagship university. So I'm not so I mean, I think that if anything, I think it may be like even a little less of a factor than it was in previous years, but yeah, it's hard. And I think I come to this from previously working at the University of Montana and helping students with their housing issues. And I mean, I think kind of an underrepresented factor in that is that it used to be much more inexpensive than for students to come to Missoula than even to pay in state in a state like California or something like that. But I think that I really think affordability in Missoula is a huge factor, a huge pressure on but yeah, so I mean, we're a college town, and that's certainly a factor. And I know that from time to time there have been some ideas to, I think there's a perception there's like a lot of underutilized housing owned by the university, and I'm not sure how much that's really reality. And I know they have some really serious constraints on how they can use those properties too. So I think people have tried to, and I remember when the pandemic started, people were really trying to get to basically turn a dorm into like a non-congregate homeless shelter. So I think people think about it and it's in the mix, but I think there are some like real constraints about using those properties. But there probably is more to know about students and how to think about students. They are people who live in our community, and they're, like anybody else, whether they come here to work or raise kids or retire, these are all members of our community. And of the city, as well as the rural areas. So yeah, you've given me something to think about. So I'm not sure I have a great answer for you, but that's definitely something to think about. Does anyone else want to put in anything on that? It's a factor to consider. That's for sure.
So I guess maybe just a clarifying statement, or just to clarify. So there was that slide that said that there's 50,800 households in Missoula County, and there's 54,000 housing units, give or take, or 55,000 housing units. That is inclusive of all of Missoula County, including the city, or okay. So yeah, I'm just trying to like pinpoint why, it feels like we need to study kind of all the above. There's 4,700 more units in Missoula County than there are households. And we're saying that we need 2,800 more to get up to a national average. That's fine. And so I guess that was the string that I was trying to pull on a little bit when I was talking about the university housing. It seems like there's there's housing here. It does, and there's housing seemingly available. But there's some misalignment, obviously, somewhere. And it might be second homes, it might be VRBOs, it might be housing that people can't have access to because it's on it's part of the university. It could be any number of things, and just trying to like track through that and figure out where those 4,700 units sit, I guess.
It's all those things. And then it's also just the reality that you need to have some units that are vacant at any given point in time to allow the market to function so that people can move from one unit to another, and the vacancy rate's intensely low. So some portion of those units are actually physically there. They're just not accessible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we all know that the vacancy rate is extremely low. I don't even know what it is in Missoula, but like the rental vacancy rate seems to be, I don't know, like 1% or 2%. I have no idea, and which seems unhealthy. But those numbers surprised me, I guess, is where I was going. That there were so many units that seemingly could be available, just aren't somehow. I guess maybe my last question is going back to that metric about the national average, like adding 2,800 units. I think that was the number to get to a national average. Is the national average healthy? Like, is that like the healthy number, or are we comparing ourselves to something that's like, I'd almost rather see it like compared to like, this is the number that we feel is healthy, rather than, because I know a lot of other communities are probably dealing with these things too. So just question.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I love that question. And it was one that we asked ourselves too. And we went through and looked at how that national average has changed over time. And it's actually been really pretty stable. And because it's inclusive of really hot markets, as well as places that are losing population in the sort of Rust Belt part of the country, and places that do and don't have affordability challenges, it feels like it's as good of a number as we're going to get for what a healthy housing market looks like. And it's just worth saying, so the ratio is 1.14 nationally. That means there are 14% more units than there are households. And we don't see really any place that has a 14% vacancy rate. Well, I mean, some places do, but that's effectively what we're saying, is that you have to get up to a place where you have that many more units. And that's to allow for all of the kinds of things that you were just describing, but also to allow people to income sort properly. Because you're never going to see a situation where you have someone move in to a community at a particular income level and magically has exactly that one unit available that happens to match their ability to afford to pay. You have to have if there's only one unit, right? You have to have a whole range of different units to allow for that to occur. So it's such a good question. What does a healthy market look like? And it's been a debate in the academic literature for a long time. And that 14% number has been real stable and seems to be as good as we're going to land on, at least without doing some much more fancy modeling.
Perfect. Thank you. Dave, did you have a question?
I want to add to that briefly, to that point brought up by Shane, that it's more of a policy question, because that's what I do mostly. I'm always a little afraid of not necessarily the county, but the city saying we need to build at all costs. There are consequences of not building properly in a proper place and in a proper areas. And so I'm always on the alert for anybody's housing plan that says it's at all costs, as many, putting many housing units as possible. So what Shane is saying, what might be healthy for Missoula County, the Valley, we might have some limits of where we can do this. I just wanted that brought my question up about, I don't see the county doing that, but I just want to add in that on that question.
Dave. If there aren't any other questions, I would entertain a motion, and maybe Jordan, if you wouldn't mind putting the motion up on the screen for potentially Neva to help us out.
Yeah, I'm happy to make a motion. Those last comments are really interesting, you guys. Thanks for bringing those up. Okay, I move that the Missoula County Housing Action Plan, Breaking Ground, as shown in the attachment A of the staff report, is found to be in conformance with the Missoula County Growth Policy, and that it be resolved that the Missoula County Housing Action Plan Breaking Ground, as shown in attachment A of the staff report, be recommended to the Missoula Board of County Commissioners for adoption as an issue plan of the Missoula County growth policy based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law.
Thank you, Neva. Do we have a second?
Second,
Was that Dave?
yes.
Okay. Moved by Neva, seconded by Dave. Any discussion?
Well, I'm going to certainly vote for it, but I guess I really hope that we can get some benchmarks for success built in, and that maybe between now and when it goes to the commissioners, I know Karen made a really good point that some of this is going to be updated in the growth policy update as far as the projections and so on that I mentioned earlier. But I think it would give us some, more specifics to as goalposts here, whatever that expression is, if we could build in some of that, and like how many units do we need? And then it would help the planning board and the commissioners think about that in relationship to the upcoming zoning for the peri-urban area. And then maybe think about it in relationship to other particular places in the county that might be able to absorb some more growth. But I appreciate everybody's efforts and the good conversation.
Any other comments? Discussion?
Yes, I would just say, I think last time I saw Shane, vacancy on multifamily was just under 1%, like 0.9%, which is crisis level vacancy compared to, even places like Denver, which are, have an extremely tight market. I think they're around 3.5%. So, even to meet demand that is out there right now, let alone what's, coming down the path, we're short, several thousand units, I believe.
That's stunning.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll jump in. I intend to support this, and I appreciate the kind of I appreciate what's been put out here. It's kind of an all of the above strategy we need to build. We need to, figure out what regulations we can use. We need to figure out how to get housing units back into the market if they're not on the market right now. And it's a ton of work, and I hope that the county is putting staff levels in that can accomplish all the things here, and I hope that Jordan gets lots of help in implementation, because there's a ton of work to do here. It's hugely important, and we need action immediately, because it's just going to continue to rumble out of control until things are done. So it's not something where we can start action 3 years from now. We've got to get it going right now, in my opinion. Any other last comments before we call a vote?
Yeah, I would just jump in on that and say, I intend to support the motion as well. I don't know if concern's the right word, but when you're trying to put a lot of product onto the market at an affordable price, it tends to be at the expense of diverse types of product, interesting types of product. A lot of times well thought out and planned type of product, and hopefully that's not what's going to happen, but it's just more expensive. It's more difficult to design communities with diverse product type that incorporate mixed use than it is to, put up 400 garden style walk-up apartments. It just is. So hope we keep in mind, what maybe some of the trade-offs might be as we try to get product to market.
Not seeing any other hands, so maybe we'll call a vote. I haven't heard any objections either, so maybe we'll just do a voice vote. All in favor of the motion read by Neva and seconded by Dave, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. Thanks, everybody. Let's see here. Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Jordan and Lorelei and Oscar. Like, it was really, really well done. So appreciate your being here tonight and spending a couple of hours with us. Sorry it got drug out probably longer than you wanted, but we do appreciate the input, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you all for your excellent questions and for letting us chat at you for the little while. Good luck with the rest of your meeting and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye.
Moving on to communications and special presentations. I don't believe we have anything. Committee reports. Tong is not here. I don't know if there's been a TPCC meeting either, but I think that was the only committee that we're serving on right now. Old business, there's nothing listed here. Is that correct, staff? Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Josh.
I'm sorry, nothing listed. I do plan to draft a letter. Hopefully it can be on behalf of the planning board addressing the safety issue with 93 between Lolo and Florence. Yesterday, I don't know how many on the board are aware, there was another accident involving a cement truck and a couple passenger vehicles that had traffic backed up for over 4 miles right in front of my house. I mean, it's just becoming unsustainable, the situation. So I'm going to get that done hopefully by the next planning board meeting, and hope and encourage everybody to edit and modify, suggest whatever you want. Yeah, I'll get that to the board hopefully soon.
And does that go to the state then, Josh? Because isn't that a state highway?
I think we were planning on sending it, if everybody's in agreement, to the Department of Transportation and to the county commissioners, I think is what we're thinking.
I think the guidance from the county is that you should send your comments to the elected officials and ask them to forward it to the city. And I sat in traffic for 2 hours trying to get to Lolo. It took me 3 hours to get from Missoula to Hamilton last night.
I mean, that's never seen that before.
It was crazy. It was literally 1 to 5 miles an hour from Missoula to south of Lolo.
Yeah. Hopefully everybody was okay. I haven't seen.
It sounds like they were like the injuries. They were super lucky. A passenger vehicle almost had a complete head-on collision with the semi, but it just was a near miss.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Treacherous area.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Karen. There's no new business or referrals. Run to comments from planning board members. Maybe I'll just say a comment, and we've already kind of touched on this, but thanks, Neva. Thanks for I've been on the board for about 2 years now, and thanks for your guidance and your really insightful comments. And yeah, we're gonna miss you. Hopefully you'll stay engaged a little bit, and we'll see you back here at some point. But no pressure, but we I very much enjoyed having you on the board, and wish you luck.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated everybody's nice comments. It's really sweet. And I've learned so much, and I hope you all do as well as you continue on in this. We are at a really challenging time, and I guess I spent a lot of time thinking about what happened with the Missoulian and, the Missoulian property. And, it just hit like, well, Gwen Jones and others said, it hit a nerve. I think it hit like the whole nervous system of our community. Like, and not, it just really kind of brought everything to the fore around concerns around gentrification and money coming in with it isn't rooted here or connected to the place very well. And I don't know what we do about it, but I hope that we will continue to talk about it at least, and because I actually see some really good things about that project, but that's just kind of got, I think the potential for that project really is, it could be really good having all those units downtown. But anyway, I'm sure you guys all thought about it too, but it's really, it's kind of a sad state of affairs and reflective of where we are as a community and how hard things are right now with these growing pains. But anyway, that's kind of a depressing parting thought, but I learned a lot and I've enjoyed getting to know all you guys. So thank you.
I just want to say thank you for bringing that up, Neva, because I was trying to think of how to express that, because I know we've all seen that happening since our last meeting. And I feel like that's just illustrative of the value that you've brought to the planning board. And I know that I've learned so much over this past year from seeing how you operate in this role. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up and for everything that you've done. And I think we're definitely going to be talking about that project and the implications of, what the community, how the community responded to it for a long time to come.
Thanks, Micah.
There are no other comments. Then we will close out the December 7th planning board meeting. Thanks, everybody.